Gutierrez. She introduced me. If you haven't met me yet, I'm an artist. I just moved to the area around 2 years ago during the pandemic from Brooklyn. And I find myself so grateful to be here with you all today. I only just started coming here, but I can tell this is a very special place, made up of special people, and I feel really honored to speak here. I'm a little nervous, but but this is not actually my first time behind a pulpit. I started young. My grandfather was a preacher, a Pentecostal preacher, and sometimes I was too. When we would go to church, as soon as we came into the building, I became, even from a young age as a child, I was now Sister Isabel. And the men and the boys in my family became brother, and the women and the girls were sister. And I always really loved that. The Pentecostal church, I think, has sort of an unofficial mantra. If I were to sum it up, it would be a phrase that you'll hear a lot at their services. As the Spirit moves you. As the Spirit moves you. So the Pentecostal church doesn't really have like an organizing body in the way some other churches do. There's not a hierarchical, if I'm saying that word right, organization. There's not a lot of detail on a common doctrine. So one church from the next will be really different. And I can't speak to all Pentecostal churches, but I can talk about what I grew up with. And as a kid, I absolutely loved church. We would go, my brother, all my cousins, and for us kids, it was kind of like a paradise. We absolutely adored it. And because of this mantra, as the Spirit moves you, we just kind of got to run around full reign. It was great. Pentecostal services are also tend to be very long. That might be one thing we all have in common. They're very long. And there was no like strict start time. We were rolling with the preachers, so we showed up whenever. And like I said, the service lasts almost all day. And so, and there's no Sunday school for the children. We're just sitting there with all the adults as well. So we sit, we listen, we sing, we dance, and then we go into the adjacent room and eat the donuts. And then we come back and we sing and we dance, and then we go run around outside and we come back in when we want to, and then we go back and run around outside. And it was a paradise for us, for me. And then of course, as the Spirit moves you, anyone comes up and speaks. And even as a child, I would take the mic sometimes. It made me too much. And when people got up and spoke, sometimes they were testifying, they were sharing their stories, and sometimes they'd be absolutely preaching. They'd start preaching spontaneously. But what really made it a paradise was not so much the spontaneity as this sort of radical equality. That is so rare to experience in real life. So rare to experience among a group of people. Especially a group of people that was often as different as we all were. Everyone showed up to this church, and it was a small church. We called it a church in the barn. And it was, I'm going to be honest, it was mostly the extended family. It was a big part of the congregation. But I remember speaking to people that would come that lived under the bridge nearby. And I also remember really fondly this older brother and sister that were mentally challenged that would come. We really had all types of people there, including my tia, who would just be dressed absolutely regally. And we were all there together, and we were all sister and brother. And we all got up to speak. It's really hard to describe what it was like. And I think I've been looking for that ever since. I tried explaining it to a friend of mine actually one time, he's like a big leftist. And he said, oh, you mean anarchy? And I said, what? No, not that. But I like to think that there was something really incredible there on many different levels, but one of them was just that lack of hierarchy. We were all, at least in that moment, at least in that building, able to see each other as brother and sister. So we're the Pentecostal church. I just realized I forgot to set my timer. We're gonna trust my internal clock. We're gonna move to Spirit moves me.
We let you know.
Anyway, so what the church sometimes lacked in specific organization or structure, there's one pillar that looking back I see was so central, and that is repetition. We already talked a little bit about that today, I feel like. And the power of repetition, it's an oratory style, and it's a tool that I think a lot of preachers and pastors use because it's so effective. We know children learn by repeating. They love the same songs. They love the same stories over and over and over again. And the truth is, we learn the same way. Now, I was also got to be there when my grandpa would be preparing his sermons. And I got to be a part of that too. My grandpa was a really great man, and I could speak about him this whole time, but I'm not going to do that. He was a great man that I really looked up to, and he had his flaws, but as an example of someone who walked the talk, he really did. I'm not sure how much of an education he got to have. I'm not entirely sure if he ever got to go to high school. He was self-taught, and I'm dyslexic myself. It can be hereditary. And when you're self-taught, when you have dyslexia, there's a certain way you read. So and not to get too off topic, but the way I learned to read was by memorizing words, recognizing words by sight, not necessarily sounding them out. And it can be a slow process. So I had this memory of, the finger on the page, word by word by word, reading with him the Bible. And the first time you go through, you're just struggling to read it. So you're just stringing it together. The second time, you read it again, strung together. Then you read it again. Then you read it again. And it would be amazing to me how the meaning would change and reach me on so many different levels, reading it again and again. The first time washes over you. The second time, you pay attention. The third time, it can start to sink in somewhere where you really can listen. There's a pastor I really liked that one time said something that I always remember, and he said the Bible is really one story. It's one story told hundreds of different ways. A story about love. And one theme that you'll notice reading the Bible is that when people are confronted with love, when when the human beings in the Bible are confronted with love, or even a visit from an angel, or the voice of God himself, their reaction is overwhelming fear and even distrust, especially when that example of love is coming from another person. Someone is expressing radical love, and the reaction is fear. And I kind of get that. We have these stories about radical love. We have heroes of radical love. And they're really scary because we don't know what that type of love will require. Require for us to do, require for us to give up, require for us to be braver than how we actually feel. There's a series on Netflix that I highly recommend. It's called The Midnight Gospel. It's an animated story series, but the stories are based on these interviews between people about spiritual issues. And at one point, the main character talks about forgiveness. And he says, people will generally agree on a lot of the basics of love and spirituality. Yes, we should love each other. Yes, we should love ourselves. But then you get to forgiveness. And there's this hesitation and resistance. And he compared it to doing pull-ups. He called forgiveness a spiritual pull-up. He says when you get to that point, people just say, there's no way. That's not happening. Absolutely not. I can't do that. This body is never going to be able to do that. There's no way. And I really like that, but I actually think that if we're going to compare, to me what I see is the true spiritual pull-up, the true thing that we look at and just seems absolutely impossible is this example of radical love and peace. And peace almost seems quaint to talk about sometimes, at least for me, and almost useless to bring up because it seems like something so far away and so impossible for us to achieve. The main obstacle to peace is an illusion, and it's a lie. And I believe, in my limited understanding, that Hinduists and Buddhists speak a lot about this too. And they talk about an illusion of individuality, that our individual selves do not reflect reality, and that truly we are one organism. And I think there is an illusion of distance between us. And there's two types of distances, I think. One is horizontal, and it's often literal distance. It's the distance between you and someone on the other side of the globe. And someone who's very far away, you can't see them, they're out of sight, they're out of mind, you can't hear them, to you, they don't exist. And of course, problems that they're dealing with, it's remote, it's personally irrelevant. And I think this is just part of human nature. I don't even know if it can be amended. There's another kind of distance too, and that distance is vertical. And it's the distance of hierarchy, of social hierarchy. And I think it's even more distorting. Vertical distance of social hierarchy, when you look up at someone, they're distorted. They don't look like you. And it's even a worse story if you're looking down. If you're looking down, all you can see is the tops of people's heads. Right? They all look the same, and they look even less human. It's more like looking down at ants. And I think as much as these things are embarrassing to admit and difficult to talk about, and something that may seem shameful. I think it's part and parcel of our humanity and what it means to be human. We have a dream of peace in our hearts, a lot of us, from somewhere, even though we've never experienced it, and yet we seem so ill-equipped to do it. There's a thing that Jesus says in the Bible, and personally I think it's often framed in a way that doesn't do it justice. Jesus calls out and he says, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And usually when we talk about that phrase, when Christians will talk about that, Jesus saying that, they're referring to, being tempted by sin, bodily temptation. But Jesus doesn't say that from the Mount. He says it the night before his execution. And however you want to take this story, there's the story of God on earth, and he's going to be executed, and he's with his friends, and he knows his friends will betray him, and he knows his time is up. And that night, he's distraught. He can't sleep, and he's praying all night. And he asks his friends, even though he knows they will betray him, he says, please stay up with me. Stay awake with me. I'm lonely, I'm terrified. Stay awake with me. And they keep falling asleep. They fall asleep 3 times. And these are people that believe that this man is the embodiment of God on earth. And they fall asleep 3 times on his last night on earth. And that's when he says, the spirit is willing, your spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And I find a lot of comfort in that. Because this is a story of God recognizing and telling us that he understands that our human nature is both sacred and protects us, but it also is the thing getting in the way of us achieving that love and that peace that seems out of reach. We have human limitations and human frailties. But yet peace is this dream that keeps living in our hearts among so many different people. There's another passage in the Bible, I'll just paraphrase it, I'm sure you may have heard it before, the imagery of the lion sleeping alongside the lamb. This era of peace promised to us. And I look at that one a lot because I want to believe that it will come to pass. And I thought about it, and I've seen the lion and the lamb lying together. And you may have too. If you watch any animal documentary, there's a place, and it's called the oasis, right? When you have a small, rare body of water in the middle of the desert, and lions will come, and antelope will come. Animals of prey and predators will come, and when you watch it, it's amazing. It's almost like they have a truce worked out, an unspoken truce. And the animals of prey don't run, and the predators don't hunt them there. And I can't figure out how they figured that out. How did they figure that out? But they recognize their symbiosis. They recognize their mutual survivor. Because even if a lion does hunt an antelope at the watering hole, and the antelope stop coming there because they can't hide, and they stop drinking water, what will happen to the lions? They will cease. They need each other to survive. If they want water, they must allow others to have water. If I want, I must be willing to give. I must be willing to extend. It reminds me of this really great painting that I really love. It's called The Table of Brotherhood. And visually it's almost the same. There's a table, and there's all these people sitting at this table. And it's a table of equality. They're all at the same height. They're all looking each other in the eyes. They've come to this table together to negotiate, to reconcile. And the people sitting at the table represent the different races, the different countries of the world. And as some kind of utopic idea, it sounds like it could be a little corny or a little schlocky, you know? But the execution of this painting tells so much more of a different story. When you look at their faces, the way this painter painted their faces, this is not entirely a table of brotherhood. It's tense, and all their faces are completely heartbroken. All their faces are drawn. It looks like they've been to hell and back to get to this table together. It looks like this table is almost the last resort. They've finally been of their mutual need and their symbiosis, and it hasn't been an easy road, you can tell. Now, there may not be the most optimistic look at the future or a vision of the future, but I see some inspiration in it, because like the animals at the watering hole, the people at this table, they're choosing peace over their fear and distrust, as unnatural as it might feel. As long as they all choose it, they can all achieve it together. The scary thing about it, of course, is that it takes everyone's participation. Everyone has to do it, and then you have to trust that everyone else will too. It's an act of radical love, though it may not be sweet and pretty. So I'll just end with this. It's a drawing I did actually a long time ago. And it's this time a line of people, and they're all been walking a long way, and they're walking in a line, and they're holding each other, and they're carrying their belongings, and they're carrying big, huge bowls for water on their heads. And they're lining up before God. And God is pregnant. And from his breasts, instead of milk, is blood for the people. And out of the mouth is this white bird, this spirit, coming out, struggling, flying to come out every time he speaks. And then they're all lining up to be filled with this water. And then the line leading away from him is a line of people with their bowls so heavy that they share with one another. Their bowls so heavy they overflow. Their bowls so heavy that they have to help each other hold them up. And that's my dream that I hold in my heart. We have to share what we all need, and that's how we'll have more of it. Thank you.